Can you do me a favor and state your name, your full name?
David D. Wilson.
All right, Mr. Wilson, TJ Laycock here is going to be interviewing you.
Okay.
TJ.
All right. Mr. Wilson, where did you grow up?
In Tennessee, just outside of Knoxville, Tennessee, in the country.
All right. What did you do in the service?
I was a pilot. I went into the cadet program when I enlisted, and I went through that and got my training.
What conflicts or wars did you take part in?
World War II. And I was stationed on Iwo Jima. I flew missions from Iwo Jima to Japan.
What were you doing when the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor?
I was visiting my friend. I heard it come over the radio. Of course, didn't have any TV in those days, but that was probably in 1941. I was still in high school at that time.
With what units did you serve?
I was, well, the last one I was in was the 78th Fighter Squadron, but I was in the cadet program for 18 months, and I got through my flight training in the cadet program, and then I had to take about a year of fighter training before I went overseas.
Which theater of war were you in?
We flew missions to Japan, whichever one that'd be.
Which battles did you take part in?
Well, I flew 8 missions from Iwo Jima to Florida. They weren't really battles as such. We started off as escort to the B-29s, and then the last 4 missions were just strafing missions because the B-29s had enough firepower. They didn't need any escort. So we just go up there and strafe targets our opportunity, really.
What specific details do you remember about combat sights, sounds, and what you saw?
Well, I remember my first takeoff on combat. We were operating off a dirt strip on Iwo Jima, and it's a short strip, and we were making these ultra long range missions, so we had 330 gallons of gas out under the wings, 265 gallon tanks, which is not, the plane wasn't designed for that. Plus 6 5-inch rockets that are hanging under the wing with the drag, and a full load of internal gas and 3,600 rounds of 50 caliber ammunition. And the plane almost is not designed to fly with that. I can still vividly remember that thing going down the runway and saying to myself, it's not going to fly, it's not going to fly. And I got to the end of the runway, all I could do is just pull back on the stick, and my only salvation was from the end of the runway down to the water, to the ocean, we had about 50 or 60 feet. So I was able to drop the nose just enough, and that gave me enough to. But you got used to that after a while. That was a way of life.
What was the worst moment you experienced?
Well, when I got shot up. When I got my plane shot up. I was on a low altitude strafing mission, and I got hit by some sort of anti-aircraft explosive shell that hit the wing of the airplane and just took about this much of it and turned it up into the slipstream like that. And consequently, I started doing this, but I was able finally to stop it and was able to struggle back out to offshore. I had 3 of my buddies cover for me because there's some Japanese fighter planes in there that day. So they were covering for me and getting me out. So I got back out there and found a destroyer and bailed out of it.
Tell me about the chaos of war. Did you know where the enemy was at all times?
Yeah, they were on the island of Japan. We knew who they were too, which is much better than the situation we got today.
Did you always know what your objective was?
Yes, never a doubt. Never a doubt. Just to win the war.
How did you feel about the men you served with?
About the what?
How about the men you served with?
I don't hear too good.
How did you feel about the men you served with?
Oh, super, super. I can't remember a single one that I didn't think was tops.
How did you feel towards the people that you fought?
Well, at that time, they were the enemy. So they were, whatever you did was okay.
What did you miss most from home while you were overseas?
Well, you know, I was only 18 when I went in, and it was just a big adventure for me. In fact, in combat, I felt like it's like a big ball game I'd trained for, you know, and I couldn't wait to get into combat until I got shot down, and I got a little more serious about it when I found out they were unhappy with me shooting at them down there.
After the war was over, was it easy to put the experience behind you?
Yeah, I came back home, went to school, got married and raised a family. I still remember it, and I still, if I had to do it again, I'd do it again. You know, in those days, patriotism was running high in this country. It's not like it is today. It's different. And you felt a duty to go and protect what you had at home, your family and your freedom. You know, freedom is not free. It's been bought with a heck of a price over the years. And it'll continue to be. If you stay free, you're going to continue to have to pay a big, high price, because there's a lot of people in the world would like to see us done in. So we don't have any choice but to, if we stay free, we have to do this military stuff big time.
What do we need to remember about World War II?
I can't think of anything specific. It was a great adventure for me until I found out they were pretty serious.
How would you like to be remembered?
Be what?
How would you like to be remembered?
Well, as a great guy, as a great daddy, as a good pilot, as a pretty good pilot, and as a patriotic citizen of the country.
That's all the questions we have for you today, Mr. Wilson.
Well,
Okay.
let me ask you a couple, Mr. Wilson, and I'll let you talk. When you were on your first flight, your first mission over Japan, so you're escorting the B-29s,
Yes.
the Super Fortresses.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Were you coming in contact with a lot of fighters when you went up?
The first couple of missions we did, but you see, the P-51 was a much better plane than the Jap planes, and it was new to the Japanese because they hadn't been able to get them up there. Because when the Marines took Iwo Jima, that got us close enough that we could put all this extra gas on the fighters and get up to escort the B-29s. The B-29s were having big problems with the Jap fighters before we were able to go up there. But the P-51 was such a much better airplane than anything the Japs had at that time, that after a couple of missions, they wouldn't even come up when we were there because they were going to get in big trouble. And we had a lot more speed, a lot more power, a lot more firepower, and a lot more armor on our planes. Most of the Japanese planes didn't have much armor, the fighter planes. So if you hit them a time or two, they were beginning to come apart. And so it was a...
Were they the same Japanese Zeros that had been used in the entire war?
Well, they kept coming off with new airplanes, but the bombing with the B-29s took their production out. So they had some better planes, but they couldn't get them on the ground, up in the air. They found a whole factory full of them with no props because the prop plant had been bombed. So we were actually... The main thing they had were the Jap Zeros, the fighter planes, and they were, early in the war, they were better planes than the Americans had. They were better performing planes. But pretty quick, well, we caught up and then got ahead of them. And so it was...
Did you yourself shoot down any fighters?
I got credit for 2 halves. You know, you go in 2 ship elements.
Yes.
And and the reason you do that, you can't see behind you. So when you're 2 ships, you spread out, and you're responsible to watch his tail, and he's responsible to watch yours if somebody's coming in on you. But then when you see an enemy plane, then you both go in on him at the same time. So you share credit. If you go down, you share credit with him. But there wasn't much during the Iwo Jima campaign. There wasn't too many fighters after the first mission or two, and there wasn't any bombers. So we'd go up, and the last 6 missions I flew were targets of opportunity, they'd say. They'd give us, and they were strafing missions on the ground, and they'd give us we could only spend 30 minutes over the mainland of Japan because of the fuel constraints. We'd drop our external tanks just before we went across the coast. And then we had 30 minutes to get back to we had a B-29 navigation ship because we didn't have good navigation, and he'd stay offshore. And we had 30 minutes to go in, do whatever we're going to do, and come back out and rendezvous with him and go back home. So we were just doing, they'd give us one airfield further inland, and then we could come out on the deck and just shoot whatever we could find. Try to find an airfield or planes or whatever, or factories or whatever. So it was but as I say, it was kind of like a big game. You know, you trained for 2.5 years in your cadet training and your fighter training, and you're trained to go into combat. You know, so here you are, a kid, man. You can't wait to get in there, man. You see what you do, you know. So it was and most of the guys, the older guys, weren't quite so anxious because they had a little more sense. But us kids, we couldn't wait to get in there.
What made you join the Army rather than the Navy or the Marine Corps?
Well, I worked about 6 months in Dayton, Ohio at the Wright-Patterson Field before I went enlisted. And I saw these pilots up there, you know, and they were hot shots. They were really hot shots. They were that fast, you know, and the girls liked them. If you always had good-looking girls, and I thought, man, that's for me. I'd never been in an airplane before I went in. But I went down, and they counted my eyes and legs and hands and said, "You're okay, go." It wasn't quite that simple, but at the time I went in, they were taking almost anything they could get, you know. So I went in, and I only had a high school degree, and so they gave us, sent us to a college. I went to Lynchburg College in Virginia for 4 months, and they gave us a college degree in 4 months up there in accelerated courses. We were in class all the time, all day. Didn't remember much of it, but it made us. But then we went to pre-flight, which was just tests and training and marching, and then from there we went to the first primary flying school. And the flying school was each one of them was about 2 months. And we moved up, and you know, we went to bigger planes, faster planes. And then at the end of that time, you graduated, you got your wings, and you got your commission. And then you went into, depends on whether you're going to bombers or fighters or what, you went into your combat training. And mine lasted a year. It was just pretty standard. So it was but I look back on it, I'm kind of fond of it. And, you know, in the Air Force, you don't see the bad part of war. You don't really see that. You don't see people really getting shot. You see planes getting shot down, but the guy will usually bail out, you know, and so you're not worried. Saying, well, he's not hurt, so it's not like when you're down in the troops, like they are in Iraq, in those streets and shooting people, and I don't think I'd like that kind of war. It's a necessary part of war, but I don't think I'd like it. I know I wouldn't like it.
When you were coming up with the P-25, am I correct?
What?
The P-25, the Mustang?
Oh, P-51.
P-51,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Did you guys have any competition with the guys who were flying the Corsairs and the Hellcats and the other airplanes out there? Was there competition between y'all?
We had some before we got to combat. Wasn't legal, but we'd have a dogfights if we could find one. And the Corsair was the only one that could really stay with us good. The rest of them were we were, see, the P-51 was a late comer in the fighter planes in the war. So they'd had all this experience to, to perfect it. It was a great airplane. It was a pilot's airplane. Everything on it was automatic. Your mixture control, you didn't have to worry about you. All the other planes, as you'd change altitude, you had to change your mixture control manually.
What is your mixture control?
That's your ratio between the gas and the air that goes into the cylinders. And as you increase your altitude, you get less oxygen per molecule. Oxygen molecule per cubic foot. So, but you're getting the same amount of fuel all the time. So you have to reduce this, lean this out, so you don't have too much oxygen in here with this. Too much gas vapors in there with the oxygen. So you're doing that, and then the prop controls, you're having to change it, whether you're climbing or whether you're diving or whatever you're doing. And of course, in the fighters, you're doing a lot of climbing and diving. So you're spending a lot of your time trying to manage your controls. But in the P-51, all of that was automatic. All you needed to know is where the starter was and where the stick was and to go. It's a great airplane. Still a great airplane. You see them at the air shows today, and they're the top performer of the prop planes at the air shows today.
When you were based out of Iwo Jima, was the island still secure at that time?
Well, when I first went in, it wasn't. We were operating, there were 3 strips that the Japanese had on the Iwo Jima. Iwo Jima was tiny. It was 8 square miles, 2 miles wide and 4 miles long. And it was an active volcano. In fact, the Mount Suribachi, the volcano on the end of the island, it was smoking all the time, But, and we had quakes every day, 2 or 3 times a day. Not big ones, but you put your stuff up on a shelf and come in, it's all out on the floor. But it's, I forgot where I was going. What did you ask me?
Well, was the island secure? Were the Japanese?
No. See, when I went in, the north part of the island wasn't secure. They had thought that they'd be able to take the island in a matter of days. And it took them almost, well over a month. But in the meantime, as soon as they secured an airfield, they flew these planes in from the P-51s were stationed down in Saipan, which is about 300 miles, 400 miles. And so they were flown in from Saipan and landed on the South Strip. But the reason the Japanese were really so determined on Iwo, this was the first Japanese land that we had tried to take. The rest of them have been stuff that they had taken from somebody else. But they were committed to hold this one. And they lost 25,000 troops. And the guys wouldn't surrender. The Japanese wouldn't surrender. They had told them, said, if you surrender, you're going to be tortured and killed, and you're not a hero, you got to stay till you die. And so they're tough to kill. They're tough to whip. And they had honeycombed that island with caves. Some of them were three deep. And the island, the ground was hot. In fact, when you moved the sand a little bit, you'd see the steam coming off. And here these guys were living down in that thing. I don't see how they survived down there. But it was a tough go. I think they took 22 prisoners out of 25,000 Japanese. Marines took 22. They just wouldn't give up. They wouldn't give up. They come out, even when you had them trapped, they come out with their guns shooting at you. So you didn't have much choice. But they were brainwashed. And it's easy to do to people, it seems like. They do it now in certain parts of the world. All you got to do is look in Iraq and Iran and see what these people are, what they believe. Well, I guess if you're taught from the time you're a little bitty kid, I guess that's just what it is. Your parents teach you that, and that's what they believe. And that they're So it's not an easy fight you guys have got coming up. Not easy, and it's not quick. You got to be patient because these people are patient. Man, they'll wait 10 years planning and then come back at you. So you got a tough job. I don't envy your job because we knew who the enemy was and we knew where they were and we could go after them. But today you don't know where he might be or what he might be planning to do. So all you can do is just be as vigilant as you can. If you see anything that looks suspicious, call somebody and tell them and let them check it out.
When you were done, I guess when the war was coming to an end, were you still on Iwo Jima when the war ended?
Yeah, I was. In fact, I stayed out in the Pacific for 9 months after the war was over. Everybody out, after the war, you were discharged on a point system. And you got points for time in service and decorations that you got and these kind of things. And of course, everybody overseas had plenty of points because we had, each time you get one of these ribbons, you get 5 points or something, and they were pretty liberal with them during the war, passing them out to us. So, but everybody was eligible for discharge as soon as the war was over, according to this point system. But they couldn't just bail out and leave all that equipment over there. So I don't know how our outfit we got selected somewhere or other. So I stayed for 9 months over after the war was over.
So when you, now do you, like my grandfather, he was in World War II.
Yeah.
And when I was a boy, we used to live in Hawaii. And
Yeah.
a lot of Japanese Americans over there.
Yeah.
And still, and this was in the 70s, he'd say, I really don't feel comfortable around them. Like, granted, he was, he wasn't a pilot, and he, saw these Japanese face to face. Did you ever have any, ill will towards them?
No. They were just doing their job like we were. And I didn't have any love for them when we were fighting them, or any sympathy for them when we were fighting them. But when the war was over, it was over. They were doing what I was doing. They were told to go do this, and they were doing their job, and I don't have any ill feeling toward them.
What would you, if you had advice to give young people about the military, is there anything you'd like to, tell them about your experience or for or against being involved with the military?
Well, I personally think that all, particularly boys and maybe the girls too, when they graduate from high school, ought to do a year's military service. I think it'd be good for the military and it's good for them because it gives them a chance to really see how the real world works, outside of school. And a lot of them don't really know what they want to do yet. Most of them, I had 4 kids, and there wasn't any of them knew for sure what they wanted to do when they got out of high school. They went on into college, and they got through college, but some of them weren't as smart, and they came out as they were when they went in. But I don't think that'll ever happen. Politically, it won't happen, but I think that would be not only good for the country, it'd be good for the young folks in the country. And I guess they still do in Israel that they have to do a year's military when they get out of high school, the boys and the girls. It used to be that way. I don't know whether it's been changed or not. I doubt it under their situation.
Yeah, I think it's the same.
It's still that way?
Yeah, they have to.
Yeah, so. And it's good for the kids. It helps them grow up. And I know when you get out of high school, you feel like you're growing, but you're not really there yet, So it does give you a chance to grow up, and gives you a chance to give something back to your country. Because all this freedom you've had and all the good things you've had in life, somebody else gave them to you. So it's your turn now to do your part. So, and it's not a bad deal. Being in the military is not a bad deal. And they talk about people getting killed in Iraq. There's more people got killed by guns in Washington, D.C. last year than were killed in Iraq. It's not that big a deal. So it's just part of one of your obligations that you need.
Is there anything else you'd like to let anyone know about your experience in World War II?
Can't think of anything. I'm old and my memory's good, but it's awful short anymore. I can't think of anything.
Could you do us a favor? Can you hold up your picture? I'm going to zoom in
Sure.
on it. And,
This picture, we were at a reunion, my wife and I, 3 or 4 years ago. I still go every 2 years to my fighter group reunion and Fighter Squadron. And one of the fellows that have been keeping up with the pictures and the history and so forth, he said, you know, I've got some pictures that I don't know who they belong to, and said, I want to put them up on a computer screen, and if you see them, and bingo, right about the second picture, this thing jumped up. I'd never seen it. One of my friends had taken it, one of my buddies had taken it, and he had sent the picture to this guy that was kind of doing a history of our Fighter Squad. And so here that was me, it popped up on the screen. And I got my girlfriend's picture, name on there. You know, when you were in a cadet program, you didn't have many steady girlfriends because you were moving every 2 months or so. So I went home on my last leave before I went overseas, and I met this girl named Polly. And I dated her 3 or 4 times, so when I got overseas, everybody was putting their girlfriends' names on the airplane, so I put Polly on that. And I've had to live with this with my wife now. No, she don't.
so that's not your wife's name, huh?
No. No, she's the one that spotted it. I had told her about naming my plane Polly, and I wasn't even paying attention. She's the one that called me and said, hey, here's your airplane over here. She spotted the name. She didn't recognize me because I'm a little skinnier than I am now. But,
all right, Mr. Wilson, I think that's going to be it for the questions.
okay.